Well, this is an interesting 3D printer kit for sure, and you'll definitely want to stay until the end to see just how interesting it got. So to preface this, I did buy this machine with my own money and haven't been paid to do this review, so everything you see here will be based on my own opinion. So to start things off, everything was well packaged and the instructions were surprisingly simple. They were so simple, in fact, that I was concerned. However, they were well suited for the machine design, as we'll soon discover. Opening up the box, the instructions came with a clear warning to remove the hotbed with the XZ module together, and this was for good reason. In order to simplify both the assembly and instructions, one of the connection cables were already attached. In the first layer of the packaging, you have the tool component box along with the nozzle head. In order to prevent damaging the XZ module, they've added zip ties to keep these together. You'll want to remove as much packaging as possible before lifting the base and frame out, as you can see here. In the end, I removed the entire packaging so I could flex it around the parts, and this was most likely the easiest method to remove the base from the packaging. In the bottom of the packaging, you have control screen and the power cable, which you'll need later. Once everything has been removed from the box, this is what you'll see. Many components have been pre-installed already, which should make things easier later on. As a general rule of thumb, I always like to check the USB to make sure I have all the information I need before I begin. 3 PowerPoint presentations were included, which contain the instructions on how to slice with Cura, installation, and a quick start guide along with some tests. I would highly recommend the company create PDF documents for their manuals in future releases. If you don't have an application which opens PPTX files, you can open these using Google Docs. The tools which will be necessary to assemble this machine are very minimalist, so you know that the steps will be minimal, which should be a good thing for beginners. However, you'll see why this is later on. Cutting off the zip ties, I discovered that the Z limit switch was already attached, so following the instructions, I also connected the Z motor. With that portion installed, I added the bolts to hold the XZ module in place. I always recommend installing these loosely until you've finished installing the bolts on both sides, at which point you can give them a final tighten. And this is where my internal alarm bells started ringing. You see, there's no protective panel below the power supply and motherboard. We'll talk about the implications of this later on in this video. You can then cut the zip ties that are holding the hot end assembly in place and move it into the center for easier access. Loosen the 3 pre-installed bolts from the hot end assembly and push them in and down to fit into the backplate. You can then tighten these up again to ensure a tight fit. This portion of the machine was very well designed, but I would definitely need to test its durability before making a decision. It's a novel approach, which I do appreciate. For the front panel monitor screen, you'll have 2 cables to attach. One of these will have a label which tells you that it must be facing upwards, so make sure to follow these instructions. Since both cables utilize separate connector types, it helps to prevent the cables from getting mixed up. When attaching the front panel, one side went in, however it seemed that the metal was bent too short and caused the other side to stick out. This made it difficult to assemble the second side. This isn't the only issue, however, since circuitry for the board comes really close to the rest of the case. Normally I would expect some distance at least, and would definitely cover this component to prevent issues. In general, electrical boards and other important connections should be sealed in some form of nutter, and this is a great example of this not being done. Plugging in the cables for the extruder motor and hot end assembly were very straightforward, and since the cables were different types, it made it easier to put together. While this design is good for the beginner, it does lead into future upgrading issues down the road, since these don't all use standard connector type. All the wiring for this machine is short, and there's absolutely no play involved, which once again makes modifications more difficult. Although the machine came with rollers for the spool holder, it didn't actually come with the mount to hold these together properly. This will most likely cause issues and is not very functional as it is in its current state. I will most likely be 3D printing a separate part to help join these together, since the components are good quality, just the implementation seems a little rushed. Back to not having that base plate for the electrical components. As you can see, not only aren't they covered, but they're also extremely close to the surface with only a half-inch gap in between. This makes the machine a big fire hazard, and unfortunately it also means I can't turn it on until I've modified it. So testing is out of the window from the get-go. This wasn't the only issue that I found with this machine. The limit switch for the Z-axis motor cable will most likely be one of the points of failure to crop up first. The hole which was cut out for this cable along with the Z-axis stepper motor is too far into the center and not far back enough, which means that the cable will most likely be rubbed whenever the heated bed moves. This could cause a short if it comes in contact with the other electrical components, such as the unsupported wiring for the hot bed. Really, the Z motor should have been turned the other way, and the cable should have been extended for both so that the wiring for the sensor could have been wrapped around the outside of the machine rather than going inwards. The Z-axis wiring actually seems like it's glued permanently to the Z-stop switch cables, which once again makes modification or repairs difficult. So after everything I've seen so far, is this worth the money? You can technically just modify a couple of aspects and be able to get a functional machine, so if you like modding constantly, then maybe. Personally, I would probably recommend buying a used machine that's known to work instead at a discounted rate. However, I will be heavily modifying this to see just how far it can go. So this will most likely be a series of videos with component price breakdowns in the future. I will mention 2 observations that I made about this machine. It seems like test units may not have been sent out prior to final production, which is something that really should have happened. Realistically, this is something which should have been recalled. However, it's a pretty good price for raw components, which is how I'm going to suggest this as a possible option for experienced tinkerers. If you just want bare bone components, the value is actually pretty good. But like I said previously, it's not for new users, and it's only for a small number of people who just want basic components to work with.
If you liked this video, please feel free to subscribe, and should you wish to support more content like this, you can do so by visiting my online shop, which is in the description below. For those of you who may not know, I do live streams twice a week on Twitch, so make sure to keep an eye out for those if you're interested. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you and take care.